Welcome to the new sound of online radio. Welcome to the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network. A mix of today's hits and hard-to-find favorites, combined with the most entertaining and intriguing talk anywhere. This is your sound. This is the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network at UBNradio.com.
She's passionate about telling stories of amazing women who are rocking the world and empowering women to live, love, and thrive. Here's your host, Catherine Gray.
Hi, welcome to Live, Love, Thrive Women's Empowerment Hour, brought to you by 360karma.com. We're happy to have you with us today. We hope you're joining the conversation of empowerment on our 360 Karma Facebook. Be sure to like us and follow us, of course, at My360Karma on Twitter and Instagram. As always, we have on fascinating and inspiring guests, and today we have on one of the stars of a new program on Starz called Vida, which is fantastic. You must catch it. Please give a warm welcome to my guest, Ser Anzoategui. Did I get the name right?
Yes.
Okay, yay.
So wonderful. Thank you so much.
Wow, it's a beautiful name.
Well, thank you.
Where's that from? Where are you from?
Well, that's Basque. So it's a Basque last name. My father, on my father's side, he decided to take on his mother's last name, which is my grandmother, and that was very interesting.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, and that's just where it came from, and I kept it. I was like, I'm gonna keep it.
And your agent didn't try to get you to go with Smith or something?
No, in the beginning, I even was like, at first it was like, well, what are they gonna, what if I can get some name that's a little bit easier, to pronounce, and I just was like, no. You know what? I'm going to keep it because it's a name that people will remember when they see it.
It's true.
And it also keeps me on my toes and fire up my butt,
I know it kept me on my toes.
Yeah, that's for sure. Be like, how do you pronounce this? And it's like,
Well, I love it. And
you.
I think you're a very gifted actor.
Thank you very much.
And I know you consider yourself a non-binary actor, so we're going to talk about that and what that means. And, and I think there's a wonderful niche for you right now, too, with the way the world is changing and learning to accept that the spectrum of people is not so to speak, black and white. There's a spectrum.
Yes,
and
right.
so that we need to celebrate that and embrace that and understand it. I think it's a big part of understanding it that, you don't really go by he or she, you go by they or them. And that's something new for people to grasp and be able to put into their thoughts and their vocabulary to respect you. Even in Hollywood, as you're this up-and-coming rising star. And by the way, Vida is an excellent program. Boy, it really just took me in, and I was like, this is a great show. I smell a Emmy Award there for you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I'll put that out there.
Yeah, let's put it out there.
Yeah.
But it's very engrossing, and I definitely recommend people to tune in.
Thank you.
And we're going to talk a little bit about what it's about. But first, I wanted to talk about your journey to how you got to be this successful actor. Do you go by actor or actress?
Well, it's interesting because I technically go by actor,
Yes.
it's gender neutral. And it's something that I always said, you never ask the doctor or differentiate with the doctress, with the doctor. So I said, why should an actor be any different? And so that's how I've always been. But in the category as that I'm in as best supporting actress, because there is a lot of education still left to be, soaked in.
Yeah.
Through the media and through how, these dialogues that we're having.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times you don't get it when you're in school. And I sure did not learn it in school. I learned it through my community and my friends.
Yeah, even the thing, I don't know how you feel about this, but gay and lesbian, I never even understood why we separated men and women that are gay. I just figured everybody's gay. So even in that conversation, I didn't understand separating the genders. But and you say there's a difference between gender and sexuality, and I think there's been a lot of conversation around that. People understanding that the way one feels has nothing to do with who they prefer to be with sexually.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's something definitely that I think people can look at me, or even in your. How do you identify?
I identify as gay, and I have a wife.
Yeah, but your
We just
gender.
got married.
Oh,
Yay!
congratulations!
Thank you.
Oh, congratulations!
Yeah, thank you.
Sweet.
When I did, in fact, I did a film 12 years ago called "I Can't Marry You," and it was about how gay people couldn't get married, and it blows me away that today it is legal and we can, and
Right.
love is love, and people are starting to open up and grasp that there is a spectrum,
Right,
and
right.
I think it's exciting to know that it's not just all black and white.
No, and also that people can look at the both of us and be like, oh, so you're the same, and we have different identities,
Exactly.
and we're not. So, and that's something that's really important to point out, because if we walk on the street, people just assume we're lesbians,
Right.
or however, I'm gay, however. But it isn't necessarily is true. It's not necessarily true.
Yeah.
I mean, I know a lot of people who are actually friends of mine who are trans men or non-binary folks who actually go out with cis men.
Yeah.
Who go out with men.
Yeah.
And so it's not necessarily something that, you walk around and someone can point and be like, that person's in the community. We're just like taught, we're not really taught and to differentiate the difference between gender expression, or, sexual identities. So it's not something that we go and we say, well, hi, my name is Ser and I am heterosexual.
Yeah.
Like, that's always the default that people always, go to
Explain it.
to explain
And,
stuff, right?
it's good if we have this conversation and teach children at a young age as they come up through the ranks that there is, a spectrum. And
Yeah.
so if they grow up learning that, the world's going to change and be
Yeah.
more receptive and open. And don't you think? If we
Oh yeah, absolutely. And
starts
also
at that level.
Absolutely. If you talk
Yeah.
about even sexuality and even just being open with who we are, then it's definitely teaches by example, and I think that's the most important.
And the biggest fallacy that misconception that people have is that if you have this conversation with children, that they're going to become something they're not. But
Yeah.
the actuality is, it allows them to become exactly who they are.
Yes.
And that's the
exactly.
beautiful part about having this conversation. Just like when they would say having the conversation with children about gay people in general was influencing them to be gay. Not the case. It's just that if they are, then it opens the door for them to feel okay about it. And that goes for the whole spectrum.
Yeah, and also to not be cruel or try to make people feel bad when they are
Right.
queer, or if a male that's supposed to be acting masculine acts feminine, or when a girl acts masculine and does
Right.
masculine things.
Right.
It's a way to embrace it instead of it to be this traumatizing
Right.
experience that later it's like this
Yeah.
ripple effect that happens, and it doesn't help anybody at all.
And the funny thing is, people, if they would understand that expanding it and accepting people exactly as they are, there's such a joyful celebration in that, to realize that everybody is different and we don't have to all be the same, and to embrace our differences rather than think that everyone has to fit into a box, which is
Yeah.
really boring, by the way.
Yeah, right,
But
right.
to have the spectrum, whether it's the different minorities or sexualities or whatever, the world is such an amazing and interesting and fascinating place when you embrace everyone.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
if we get it, it's like anytime I feel I get defensive on anything, it's also like looking at within, to be able to look at why am I getting. It's like a great indicator that why is this an issue for me, and it may be a need to look deeper, to look at
Yeah.
myself, so that I could come to terms with those things. But a lot of times people just say no, it's not that, and their ego takes over.
Right.
And it's instead of acting through ego, which it's like when egos, fight against each other or go against, or even, are sparring, it's like that usually leads to more ego and more down that route. So when you come with an open heart,
Right.
that's when I think you can really have more possibilities in life happen.
Yeah, a more
People ask me-
spiritual place.
Yeah, people
Yeah.
ask me like how you get to where you're at and everything too, and I think it also comes from cultivating that space and being able to really okay, well, this is happening, and but how can we we come from an open space of possibility. When you come from an open space of possibility, then anything could happen. Like
Exactly.
things that you put to seed could, sprout.
I love the
like,
way you
into,
think.
You know.
Yeah, that makes you such an inspiration to those up and coming actors too,
Mm-hmm.
that are looking at your career, and I want them to realize this didn't happen overnight, and
Right,
it didn't
yeah.
happen without struggle. And I really respect the path that you shared with me. That you didn't come with a lot of means to make this happen. You were talking to me about a lot of actors put themselves in a lot of debt to even be able to go through acting and get a degree, which you have a degree in
the theater.
in theater, right? And that that it isn't an easy path, but if you really, like you, know that this is what you're meant to do and this is what makes you happy and this is your gift, that you must do it and you must give it 100%. And that's what I've seen, you do. That's a result of you really sticking with creating your own projects. And, and I do believe there's a term that we use on 360 Karma that's called create your fate. And that's what I believe we are meant to do, is create our fate. Life's accomplishments don't happen to us. They happen from, like you said, keeping your vision, keeping your eye on the vision, but also taking the actions. And so right out of school, I know that you wrote your own one-person show. Right?
Yeah. I was actually not getting like what I wanted in television. Like I wasn't getting cast in certain. I was going for auditions. I got an agent in school actually doing a showcase, but before I graduated, like I went to 6 years of college before transferring to a four-year university. But in a year, I was able to do be in plays and do that kind of thing. And then I graduated, and I thought that I was going to be able to get cast in shows, and then I realized that I wasn't. And also I had to learn a lot about myself as well. It's like a process of learning, as well as crafting my own training to be able to get to the level that I needed to be to compete with other actors. And so even though I wasn't getting cast, I said, well, I want to do something, because I know I'm talented. I said, I know I can be a good actor, and I know that I could write, and so why don't I do what John Leguizamo does? And when I saw that there was other people doing solo shows, and I said, this is what I want to do, is specifically writing about my family and the Latinx experience, as I felt a lot of times people had a disconnection, or even within my own community, we had like this, a lot of fights and struggles between our own, and colorism and everything like that. So I wanted to like be able to write something that not only like it was something for me to act in, but that made an impact, that connected us to connect us in this way that really was like on a basis that, I don't know, there was just a dialogue, maybe in a room we're listening to, you're watching the play, and you're listening to everything, and you're like, okay, and then you may process whatever that may be.
Right.
Who am I to say?
Right.
But I did want, other people to be in a room, and I wanted it to be like this uniting or, effort of different Latinx people coming together. So I thought that was really great. And also that I didn't translate myself. I was like, I'm not going to translate any of the Spanish that I have in my show. I want people to really appreciate the Spanish language and its beautiful intonations and its poetry and its cadences and all these things. So I was just really, that's part of what I wanted as a writer,
And you shared with me that you speak different dialects of Spanish.
Well, yeah,
yes?
I mean, I grew up with Cubans as well. I grew up with, my parents are Argentinian and from Paraguay. And so I mainly picked up the Argentinian accent, which seemed to be what was the dominant dialect. And
in this show on Starz, Vida, you play Mexican, yes?
Well, it's
is
not
it?
necessarily, I think, I think it's like, I'm definitely feel that the character is Chicana, So.
And let's explain to people what
but-
that means, Chicano, because a lot of people don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
So, for myself, Chicana is an identity that's usually comes from the people that are Mexican Americans that are from, the border areas, and also within, other areas that was Mexico. And so what happened was that in the 60s, there was the East LA walkouts, for example, were one example of it, where the students decided that they didn't want to, they wanted more out of their education than what they were given. And because they were Mexican and brown, they were being, what's it
Marginalized.
called? Marginalized because
Yeah.
of it. And they were put on certain tracks that only made them be like mechanics or,
Right.
that kind of thing. And so they wanted more for the education that wasn't racist. And so that's where the Chicana identity, emerged from, is that sort of like struggle, but the fight for equal rights. Specifically in education, then it became a struggle because it is brown bodies generally that are usually a target from a lot of different, like the police and these kinds of, other issues that we find, incarceration numbers in brown and black communities and that kind of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah. And
So
so
that's-
you
it's
you
yeah.
like participating in creating shows and being in shows that are educating people and making a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think when, you always want to be like in a show that is like about your community or about like, oh, it's LGBTQ, like I want, this to be respectful and reflective in a way that would make a difference and open hearts and minds and that kind of thing. So I think that I am, in this place where Vida came right in this time, because a lot of people that are talented and are great come before this, where there weren't as many roles, or perhaps they're not, getting the satisfaction of creating projects in the in television that are in this way, or perhaps they are, but then they're whitewashed, or they're, okay, so, and that go through that process, right? So it's in this way that it's great that Vida came, and I'm doing my work, and I think because I was doing my work in the community, and also within however I could in social media and that kind of stuff, then, it was sort of like it came like this, and it met.
Right.
And I'm really a big believer. Just keep on doing what you're doing. Like, keep on doing.
Yeah. Don't give up.
Don't give up.
Be
And
tenacious.
even when I was like doing social services for HIV positive and people with disabilities, like it was like, why am I doing this? Like, I knew at the time, I was like,
Yeah.
you do love it, and then you're like, oh, it's so much work, because it is a lot of work. But then it's like, it taught me a lot.
Yeah.
And
at least
it's like,
you were
it doesn't
doing
matter.
something. You were
It
doing
doesn't
something
matter.
of-
It leads me to where I'm supposed to be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's nice that you were doing something to give back in that arena too. So your full-time job to make these other things happen. I know you were telling me you were working to, rent the theater, to put on your show.
Yeah.
And people have to realize they have to think out of the box like that.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
was before like GoFundMe and stuff. And the thing is that there's so many artists. There's so many artists, especially in Los Angeles. So I just did the work, and I paid for it myself, and I did it, and I just invited people. And sometimes like it wasn't that expensive, but other times it was, because there wasn't crowdsourcing at the time.
Right. And even that GoFundMe is hard to raise, but it is possible, and it does help a lot of shows get
Yeah.
off the ground.
Absolutely.
Also, From the Heart Productions is one that I recommend to a lot of filmmakers.
Okay, cool.
It allows them to raise money where it's tax-free to the donor.
wonderful.
So they're
look at
really cool, and they give film grants too.
Oh, awesome.
From the
Great.
Heart Productions, yeah. So what would be your advice to someone coming up the ranks as an actor about how to, have a successful career like you have? And, I'm so happy for you that you're riding high. You're on this great award-winning show, up for Emmy nominations, and doing what you love. And,
Yeah.
that really inspires people to, I think, be tenacious and know, if they could do it, so could I,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I grew up in Huntington Park, and I did
Which is local here to LA.
yeah, Southeast Los Angeles, and I think like growing up, I was really forced to be what it was to be like the tip. This is what we want you to grow up in. So I didn't have an upbringing where I was really
Allowed to be yourself.
allowed to be myself, but also my artistic maybe my artistic inclinations weren't allowed to be explored.
Right. A lot of times artists get stifled from
so
their parents.
basically
yeah.
that's like kind of like what happens, so you could imagine. And so this is their idea, is that I'd grow up and get married and have kids and do that whole thing.
Well,
So-
that's very much the Latin culture.
Yeah.
A woman is supposed to do this and be this and
Right.
whatnot. And so that's certainly a challenge for a lot of people in that
Yeah,
culture.
definitely.
Do you think it's changing? Do you think the Latin community is becoming more embracing and not having people just be put in that pocket? I mean, certainly people like yourself are helping to open their eyes to possibilities, right?
What do you mean, like?
Well, is it still really ingrained in that culture, or are they starting to open up and be a little bit more open-minded?
With when it comes to LGBT, or like when it comes to
Right,
like
where it
being
comes
married,
to
or things like
or
that?
just like women, being the little woman who has the kids and raises them, or are they opening up to women being able to be successful and have their own careers and
Well, I think-
and LGBT, like the whole thing? Are
Well,
they
I mean,
opening
I think
up?
it's. I mean, I can't speak for everybody. You know, I know that I'm Latinx, but I'm not. I don't represent everybody. So definitely not in my family. That's the only one I could talk about. There are definitely people that are like out there supporting. But I mean, in bringing it up, I mean, I was just like, this is something that for me. I grew up where it was like, you don't talk about politics much. You listen to the news, and that's where you get your news, so your news and your information from. And then also, this is something that I felt passionate about. I mean, I also grew up with knowing that what was going on in Cuba, and that people were like, the people there were suffering, like where they didn't have certain things that we had. So I know I have things. I have soap. I have like these certain things. So I would give my toys, and I give it to Cubans. And so I thought, I don't know, something that stuck with me. And then also growing up in Argentina, going and living there, also seeing that people were involved they were involved in politics, that they voted, like that it was a whole other system. And knowing that, it's like interesting to learn that at a younger going, why do they do it differently? And so it's just like a way for me to be like, okay, this is different. But when I wanted to explore that, it wasn't something my family wanted to explore. They didn't want to talk about anything. So I was like, okay. So growing up in that, I had to find my own voice. Even though I grew up in that, I would go to Argentina to see women, be powerful, speak up, and be the ones
that
with strong voice.
inspired
That
you.
is like, what? So
Yeah.
these kinds of things were really important. And then, but once I got into college, I went to Rio Hondo. I wanted to get far away from my house, and from like, not as far away from my house, but far away from my school. And I didn't want to go to like where people went. So I was like, all right, I need to like be free from persecution, because I went to Catholic school.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to explore my sexuality as well. I wanted to be stop
you
being-
are. Be
yeah,
authentic.
Be authentic. Yeah, be
Yeah.
me instead of like.
Yes, the happiness is in being authentic.
Excuse me.
You know?
Yeah. So then I decided, I started taking like different courses of theater, like Theater 101. That was the only theater I took, and then I took like philosophy and all that stuff, and then I got inspired, and I wrote. I saw John Leguizamo, and then I started writing. I wrote my first one-woman show, and it was like 15 minutes. It was like kind of true, kind of not. And I thought it was cool. And then it was like, you should write. And I was like, really? And so I started writing. I started exploring.
Yeah.
My mom was like, no, But because I saw there was other people like me, the theater really helped me.
Yeah.
And really saved me, because I was like, I'm not going crazy.
Right.
Like,
Sometimes
people
we
stay up
create
till
our
late
support
creating
system.
stuff. Like,
Yeah.
it's not just me, Mom.
Yeah. And that's great that you had that theater family around you to encourage you to bring out your
Well,
gifts.
I mean, yes, in a way, in the like that,
Yeah.
I had like great like Bill Corf, from Rio Hondo, but like there was other, like the students, sometimes the guys were so jealous that
Oh,
it was
yeah.
so toxic that they, it was like really hard to do improv with them, because they would like always they would get jealous.
Yeah.
They would try to like, talk about stuff that degrade me. So things like that when it comes to, and then to be able to be free, you would think in the theater that there would be more like open LGBTQ, IA people, but it was like very machista guys.
Yeah.
So that was really
that's
a big
kinda
challenge.
Hollywood. That's Hollywood.
Yeah, and then there's that whole thing
mostly
about
men
Hollywood
directors
too.
and
Exactly.
writers and-
so it's giving me a taste of how
Yeah.
it is, and you know what? I'm like grateful for things, because it said, no, I'm not gonna do that. No, you're not right. No. So then I created my own stuff, and I said,
love
I don't
that.
care, you're not casting me. I know that I could even grow as an actor. I could do this, and then I just kept doing it.
Yeah.
Like I just kept going. And I kept doing, because that was the only thing I had, like the
Yeah.
show. Like I just knew there was
You
a
know-
solo show, and that's it. I just hung on to it.
I can't imagine you not being yourself and not writing and not acting. If you took all those things away from you, you wouldn't be the beautiful person you are today,
Right.
doing this magnificent work that inspires people. So what a great message. Be exactly who you are, your authentic self, and do what your gifts are, your God-given gifts.
You have to be creative
and-
instead of destructive, because
Yeah.
like when you don't have those tools to be able to even be who you are, then what are you left to be who you're not? So it's like, you know what I mean?
And in doing this, being yourself and doing what you love, your gifts, it makes you so happy. I mean, I can see,
yeah.
you know, you're just bursting with joy about being on the show, doing what you love, and that's really the message, I think. And you're walking the walk and talking the talk, and that's a beautiful thing.
Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
What we're going to wrap up, and I just want to say, what would you like people to get from the show? I want them to tune in on Starz. It's called Vida. It's really cutting edge. It's very timely because it's set with a Mexican community here in Los Angeles. It's about love and loss and LGBTQ issues too, and it's really riveting, and I hope people will tune in. They're really going to love it. It's really captures you.
I get
What would you like?
teary-eyed just thinking about it.
Oh, I
I
love that.
mean, I really am appreciative to be in this role, in this
Yeah.
position, to be in this show that's so historic.
It is. It's amazing and cutting edge.
Yeah, and I feel that I want, you know, when people see it, they're gonna, like you said, they're gonna be pulled right in, and it's really like about, you know, it's a Latinx people, and it's about LGBTQ queers, you know, and so I want, what I would like, I guess it's so hard to say because it feels like, you know, to be able to connect, like, you know, to connect to the story and just go on the ride. Just go on the ride. And I think your hearts and your minds will open up and be better for it. And I also think that, you know, I think that people that are going through a lot of struggles will see the show and see they're not alone. So it will be a great cathartic experience and journey for the audience, no matter, you know, your background, but specifically if you're LGBTQIA, and specific if you're Chicana, Chicanx, Latinx, it'll definitely feel that we're right there with you. You are not alone, and we are in it together.
And I have to tell you, even if you're not any of those, like, I've loved the show. So great show. Tune
you.
in at Starz, Vida, Vida. Sarah, thanks for being on. You're such a beautiful
you.
person and very inspiring.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next Wednesday at noon. Make it a great week. Hugs and happiness.